Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Jacob Fitzgerald. Today I will be presenting on mandatory sentencing or mandatory minimum sentencing. Um, Mandatory sentencing it's basically when a judge gives a sentence um, for whatever crime it is. Say if it's mostly for like drug crimes and serious crimes, but the sentence could be say 10 years. The judge has to give a mandatory minimum sentence for like a term they're required to serve. So say if the judge gives 20 years, the mandatory minimum could be they have to serve 10 years before they get for parole. So mandatory minimum sentencing, the actual definition for that is a person convicted of a crime must be in prison for a minimum term, as opposed to leaving the length of the punishment is up to the judges. Um, Mandatory sentencing is usually given to criminals who are convicted of a certain serious crime, drug crime, um, requiring a minimum kind of term for that crime. Here's a little video I'm going to pull up for you guys. Just a 30 seconds long, kind of explain it a little bit in different
Why
words.
does the U.S. jail more people than any other country? One reason, mandatory minimums. These were introduced in the 1980s and apply to low-level crimes. Mandatory minimums mean convicted people have to serve a minimum sentence, whether or not a judge thinks they deserve it. For example, drug crimes involving crack, heroin, or marijuana trigger minimum sentences. So do crimes involving firearms, pornography, and immigration. But opponents say the punishment doesn't always fit the crime. Take the story of Kemba Smith, an unemployed woman who moved in with her drug dealer boyfriend. After he was murdered,
And that was just a little short video for you guys to kind of understand what the sentencing is really for. Like I said, it's for drugs. And then they kind of advanced it into more serious crimes like treason, murder, the highest kind of crime you can get convicted of. So sentencing has been around for 200 years now. I mean, it came around with back to 1790 when Congress passed the Crime Act. It only had a few crimes. I think 23 crimes that were on it, but it wasn't really used that well as it is now, at least to me. And yes, there are some cons to it and downfalls, but it does everything else. 40 to 50 years ago, the Congress went through a first comprehensive series of federal crimes, treason, murder, stuff like that. It was getting more common. In the 70s, crime really started to increase, and they saw they had to do something about it. And so before mandatory sentencing, it was all about discretionary sentencing, which is more founded in. It was kind of what prisons were founded upon. It means a judge is provided with statutory limits of an acceptable sentence for a crime around 5 to 25 years, say for armed robbery, but the judge must decide on the facts first. It's not like a mandatory part. It's kind of it's basically what the word means, discretionary. So the judge has discretion to make what the term is or what the minimum is. And then, like I said, in the 70s, they started to increase crime, so the lawmakers wanted to, put a little stop to this. So my first point on why I'm for, actually, I'm going to say what my stance for, like a thesis. I am for mandatory sentencing. Yes, there are some things where I have a little half and half on, but that's everybody for a thing. Mandatory sentencing or mandatory minimums are a good thing because it will result in no more bias in all parties. It eliminates bias, so eliminating bias meaning the judges. So traditional judges usually tend to have a little bit of a racial bias on people, and this will kind of factor in all people who do the same crime. They have to do a certain amount of terms. A judge can't say, hey, this guy is a different race, he gets this crime, but this guy is a different race, he gets a lesser crime. Or a lesser term, smaller term. The next part is I think it allows people to get out early. Say if they're convicted of a crime they didn't do, or they also get a chance to get a second chance, and I'm big for second chances, and they get a chance to rehabilitate and then change themselves. And that's what prison's about. And then it also, what I've researched is it also leads to a decrease in serious crime rates, such as treason. You don't really see that much often here, and I think it has an overall good impact on society and criminals. So my couple reasoning, I have a quote here. It says about it's a Natalie Rigoli. She's a journalist. They help with creating a standard of justice that is applied equally to all parties who have been charged with similar crimes. That means similar crimes, meaning, say a white judge sees a white person that did the same crime as a African American. That judge, if it's a traditional judge, they sometimes have a racial bias on them, which is just not okay to do. And this mandatory sentencing makes sure that each person gets the same crime, not that one race is getting a longer term or a longer minimum than this other race. It's just about equalness and justice to all races. All charged people, no matter the race, the religion, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, they'll get the same sentence because of the mandatory minimum, and that's a good thing for me. You don't want to single out a race or anything. It's just not okay. It deters racial bias against people in the system. Like I said, white traditional judges tend to live in the past. This also the biggest thing in the system, in the justice system, is fairness and consistency. Especially for families and people getting convicted, you don't want one person, like I said, getting a different term. That's just not being consistent. It also kind of makes sure they know that they have their rights still, even if they're getting convicted. Next part I'm doing is second chances. Second chances. I myself want to be a corrections officer, and the biggest thing I want to do is keep the bad people out of society and make a better society. But I also want to see people change and get a second chance for people who deserve it. Now, I'm not saying all people in prison deserve a second chance, but some people in there who do not as like a murder crime or a treason crime, they do change, and they come out and they do good things. As we watched that video, that person who came out of prison, he started working at soup kitchens, did a bunch of good things for society. Because the biggest thing for prisons is they want to make sure people come out and can become a functioning member of society. Mandatory sentencing allows them to serve a required time, but it helps them reflect on their mistakes still. It offers prisoners for more options of parole and faster release. It also uncrowds prison. That was a kind of debatable topic in my presentation. And then for me, prisoners make two choices in there. They either keep themselves in prison or they do things that'll get them out early. And this can provide a mandatory minimum. It can provide people to know that they can get out early, and they have a second chance if they really fight for it. The next thing I have is decreasing crime rates. So decreasing crime rates, making a mandatory minimum for, say, a murder. And yes, murder has been at a higher rate lately, but it kind of, people can see what kind of path they're going to go down if they know what their punishment is, what the consequences for their crime. So maybe that will deter them from making that mistake or making that bad choice, because all it takes is one bad choice for a lifetime of consequences. And then knowing the path they will have basically after could deter them. Ever since 70s to 80s, capital punishment has been kind of unconstitutionalized, but in some states it still is okay to do. I'm not going to talk about my stance on that one, but this capital punishment could make, like I said, it could deter them from doing it. So say if they're about to commit a murder or something like that, or do a crime like a 3-strike law, 1, 2, 3, it could make the punishment not as it could make the people not want to do it because they know what they're going to do or what's going to happen to them after. Since the 80s, there has been a significant drop in drug rate crimes. Now, that's not to say that people are getting it and they're not just finding out about it, but that's just what the stats say. And then consequences of the minimum deters criminals, which was my biggest thing in this one. So in conclusion, mandatory sentencing has benefits for society, and like I said, it has its downfalls, it has its downsides, as just anything else, especially in the justice system. Not everybody's going to agree on one thing. especially in politics and stuff like this. But prisoners, so helps prisoners, and people who commit the crime. Helps eliminating bias in the parties and all parties. It allows second chances, parole, faster release, stuff like that, and then it also decreases crime rates. And those are my three biggest things, especially decreasing crime rates in the 80s. So I am for mandatory sentencing. As long as it's justified for all people, it's used right in the system, and it, that not that it helps these criminals, but that it helps them, realize what's going to happen to them after. So, but yeah, I'm for mandatory sentencing, and that's all I have. Thank you, guys.